Shoot.
I have a question. That was a huge cliffhanger, Tim. Like you sort of left it at conservation is like a big piece of that. I was wondering, if we use the analog to the energy industry, there are lots of different visions for what green energy looks like. So what are some of your ideas for what like a conservation model might look like for companies that are trying to leave a smaller footprint or be a little bit more conscientious of their surroundings that they're going to be entering? I mean, just off the top of your head, if you have any ideas.
Sure, I think two really practical ones, right? One of them, and I think we were trading a few emails about this, was like sort of the need for more nuanced analytics, right? If you have a really poor tool, your main impression or your main intuition is that you need to gather more information about people in order to make useful conclusions. But often that's really not the case, right? Like it may, I think, sort of marketers or advertisers might benefit a lot from bringing in people who actually have a lot of quantitative experience. And I think that might be a really important thing. That's sort of a social kind of clean tech in a way, I guess.
Yeah.
Cool.
This is a question for Tim. Tim, your model seems to me to treat advertising more as information than as meaning. And as you know, there are models out there that say, well, really, it's never very interesting when it's merely information and a request as an attempt to pitch. It gets more interesting, and it takes on its cultural significance when it's mobilizing cultural meaning, when it's participating in the culture at that moment of the pitch. So there's that gift economy notion that people are now using to characterize commerce on the net. Is it? What do you make of that gift economy model?
Yeah, I mean, I think Jonah's analysis is super strong here, right? Like the idea of breaking down platforms to try to figure out what people do on them and how that affects the kind of culture that they spread on it, I think is an incredibly sort of great way of looking at it, because it actually brings up exactly that nuance, right? There's kind of the social context in which gifts, in this case information, is passed around. But I mean, I do believe, I guess, in this other argument that just advertising is information in a really raw sense, right? So someone pointed out to me recently that Craigslist, right, is actually just a site of advertisements. But no one thinks about it because you get the information that you want, right? And so we actually interpret it as information as opposed to advertising. But
totally. But if you look at the work of Wyden and Kennedy, for instance, I mean, almost all of that advertising is it's cultural content that enters the culture and gets used by the culture and gets played back. And so it's that creepy factor you were talking about. When that ad finds you and it matches not your product needs, but your cultural sensibility, perhaps that your calculation shifts.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things you see in the ad industry right now, particularly online advertising, is lots of people figuring out how to get new data sources to optimize banner ads, and they're doing things like retargeting. You visit a site shopping for shoes, and then you're on some other site and you see a shoe ad, and it's all these things don't get at the best creative ads of the last 100 years where someone makes something that fits with the culture and inspires you. It's really about just like getting a low click rate a little bit higher, and so there's a lot of like optimization of a broken system, I think, going on. And the question of when do we hit some new models online that allow us to inspire people or make things that are kind of incredible or amazing or fit with the culture. And one of the things that we've been working on a lot at BuzzFeed is doing analysis of using sort of trying to combine art and science at every level. So when we're trying to decide what kind of content to create, we have tools to look at what sorts of things have taken off and what the culture is obsessed with and what are people obsessing about at that time. And that doesn't you can't just take that and make that into an ad. That has to be something that you use to inspire you to come up with a creative new idea, and hopefully an idea that pushes that even further or in some new way. And then you do that, and then once you put it out there, you see, did it work? Did the culture actually respond to it? And I think the metric of clicks is kind of an old metric, and if you can get to the metric of, I actually shared this with a friend because it was so cool, or so interesting, or it resonated with the culture or the zeitgeist, or and sites linked to it, and people search for it, and people tweet it, then that's sort of what you're going after. And maybe your creative idea that was inspired by the right things falls flat and doesn't work, but if you do a bunch of them, you can start to get to the point where you get better at hitting that sort of ultimate holy grail of advertising, which is something that people say, whoa, that's so amazing. I'm so glad I saw that. And that's a hard thing to do. And I think that, in the Mad Men era, you did that by drinking a lot of scotch and pacing around and like hoping you hit on it, and usually you didn't. And I think in the internet era, you can do it by having tons of ideas and being a little more ADD and trying a whole bunch of different things. And you're going to actually have more ideas that end up working in the long run, because you can try more things and get inspired by more data. So that's sort of how I think about it.
Yeah, and one of the things I really like that you guys have done is tried to find ways of incentivizing people to produce better ads as well. Like there's a whole BuzzFeed Boost kind of structure that I thought was really neat. I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, so we launched something called BuzzFeed Boost, which is our self-serve advertising platform where you can go create a page on BuzzFeed, put your videos, put your images, put lists, put quizzes, whatever kind of content you want to create, and then you pay to get promotion on the front of BuzzFeed, and you can do a $100 boost or up to a $500 boost, and the amount you pay depends on how viral your content is. And so this is a kind of counterintuitive thing. We charge you less per impression if you also get viral impressions. So you get a double discount if your ad is good. You get the discount of more people seeing it because people are sharing it, and we lower the CPM of the paid impressions. And that's really because we want advertisers to flock to our platform who make good ads that people want to share, because if we start having crappy ads on the site, it destroys the whole experience of the site, and it destroys the sort of model that we're using of trying to make advertising that's actually good, that people actually want to share.
Cool. So another question?
Yeah, Tim, I really thought that graphic you showed of the data collected and the creepiness was really amazing. I think of stuff like Foursquare, what they're doing on the West Coast now at that supermarket chain, where it'll look at what you check into. And if you check into gyms a lot and you come into the grocery store at 8 o'clock in the morning every day, you're probably going to the gym, and they'll give you $1 off Gatorade. Some people would probably think that's a little creepy. I look at something like that and say, wow, that's a great deal. They're really targeting what I'm interested in. Thinking about that graph and looking at things in the next couple of years or so, do you think people will get more comfortable handing over more of their data if they're getting something out of it? And how much do you think it's really got to be opted in? Whereas the last panel, the guy was saying, people are literally stalking, consumers on Foursquare.
Sure. I think, so just go back to the chart. The way I've been thinking about it actually is that, first of all, where that peak is varies for different kinds of categories of things, right? But there's this really interesting argument that someone brought up to me where really services and advertisers and consumers are actually all in this race, right? And there's this big bet that's being made about how far that OMG way too creepy line is going to shift to the right? So the argument is, well, maybe we can keep on collecting data and people's need for privacy will just drop fast enough that we'll get to a point where we can make those recommendations and there won't be any problem.
I mean, that's Facebook's position.
Yeah, right. That's Facebook's position, exactly. And I think it's a big debate. I normally would tend to err on the side that the pace at which data is going to collect it is going to outstrip the creepy factor faster. But I think it's an open question, actually, and it probably varies quite a bit from place to place. But I agree that that element's there. I mean, if I could make a little sweet animation, I would.
But what about not telling anyone you're collecting information about them?
Right.
So it's not creepy, right?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, there's all sorts of great. I mean, I thought this curve is kind of helpful because it allows you to kind of visually think about all the things that people are trying to do, right? Because like one of the strategies, if you're a company, is let's not let them know we're collecting data, right? So you can give the impression that the curve, you're earlier on the curve when you're actually much further away. And so there's this kind of gamesmanship game, right? Where if I can hide from you how much I'm collecting about you until I can make great recommendations, then I'm in the clear, right? And it's just a risk game at that point. I mean, you see actually a lot of companies playing that, right? So how much data is Google collecting on you? Unclear. And I think that's part of it if it isn't an explicit strategy.
I mean, I think the biggest place you see people playing that game is the people who are doing ad optimizations on ad networks.
Yeah.
Because they're collecting a lot of data about all the sites that you visit and have tracking codes places, and then they're able to target ads to you, and you might not, you don't even know they exist. You don't have any relationship with them. You're not, they're third-party code on a bunch of sites you visit, but you don't have any direct relationship with them or even ever think about them if you're the average consumer.
Right. Exactly.